Good afternoon. My name is Jay Hand. This is the first of the videos I'm doing to explain my positions, and I'm going to start on the topic of inflation because that's one of the most immediate pressing problems that we have right now in California and in the nation. Because this is such a complicated subject, I'm going to be referring to my little written script here. I don't have a teleprompter, so I hope I don't get too distracted. Okay, well, you know, it's said that inflation is the cruelest tax of all. It affects our daily lives, and there's not much we can do about it. Now, the rate has come down a little from last year, but it's still about 5%. And overall, since April 2021, prices have increased on the average about 13%. Groceries have risen 20%, and gasoline and diesel have risen about 50%. Well, and the interest on car loans has also been increased, and home loans, and that's not had a good effect on the housing market. Okay, so on that inflation and fuel prices, although President Biden says that all of this increase in the fuel prices are due to the war in Ukraine, that's not really the case. Looking here at the numbers, we have sanctions on Russia, which supposedly should restrict their exports of oil and gas products, and that would, of course, raise the price of petroleum because Russia is one of the largest exporters and producers of those products. But it hasn't. Russia's been selling through India and other countries. Here I have a couple charts. On January 18th, 2021, the retail and gas prices in the U.S. averaged $2.46 a gallon. Okay, that was the day before Mr. Biden was inaugurated. But when the war started in Ukraine, in late February 2022, the average price was $3.70. That's a 50% increase, which had nothing to do with the war. Why did it go up? Well, it wasn't because of burgeoning COVID demand, because immediately before COVID broke out in March 2020, the average price per gallon was $2.51, about the same amount as Biden's inauguration. Well, here's why it increased. Diesel and gas are made from crude oil, and crude oil prices are based, it's a commodity, and the price is set on the futures market, just like pork bellies or wheat or cotton. So the futures market takes account of the supply and demand as it is right now and as it's forecast to be. During a campaign event in September 2019 in Newcastle, New Hampshire, Joe Biden stated the following: "But kiddo, I just want you to take a look, okay? You don't have to agree, but I want you to look in my eyes. I guarantee you, we're going to end fossil fuel." And that is exactly what Biden started to do once he got into office. The crude oil market, being a futures market, is also, because it's based on expectations, it has to kind of forecast what's going to happen. And what the market started to do is forecast in a decreasing U.S. supply and worldwide supply of oil. Why? Well, when the president says he's going to get rid of fossil fuels, when he cancels the Keystone Pipeline, when he cancels leases for federal lands, well, people who invest in these, and it's a very risky business to invest in oil wells and explore because they might come up dry, well, they don't want to spend the money. And banks don't want to lend the money. So even though the number of leases that are outstanding has not gone down or been affected very much, it still affects the price because people are not going to be bringing more oil and gas online in the future. Now, you can say that we should reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. I'll talk about that in another video. But, when you introduce market distortions like this, it has an effect. And it has had an effect. Okay, so, I have to give a word to our sponsor. Is your president forgetting where he is? Is he losing the sheen in his coat? Is he shaking hands with imaginary people? Well, a leading doctor's come up with a solution. It's called roughage. Roughage is not a food, it's a supplement. You just sprinkle a little bit on his ice cream and he'll lick it right up. And it's guaranteed for 4 years to make your chief executive full of vigor and vim. And this formula has been developed by a leading doctor. Okay, she's not a medical doctor, she's a doctor of education, but she's still a doctor, so what's the difference? All right. Thank you for letting me do that. We have to, pay the bills around here. Okay, back to inflation. Inflation is defined as too much money chasing too few goods and services. When we talk about money, of course, it means the money in your jeans, in your pocket, but it also means money in your bank, in bank accounts, and other measures. They're called M1 and M2, but M2 is the combined one. Well, there's two ways of affecting the money supply. Now, this is getting a little wonky, but bear with me. One is called monetary policy, and the other is called fiscal policy. Monetary policy. When you go to the bank and put your $100 in your bank account, the bank doesn't keep that in the drawer. It lends that money out. And the degree to whether it can loan that money out or invest it depends on what's called the reserve rate. Now, before March 2020, the Federal Reserve, which sets this, had varying levels of reserve rates. For example, it was like 10%. So a bank could loan out only 90% of the money that it had on deposit. Starting in March 2020, what the Fed did is they removed that and they said you can loan out 100% of what you have on deposits. Now you can see this may cause some problems with bank runs, because if there's a bank run, the bank doesn't have any reserve of cash. But, that's another problem. But what this also means, how the Fed does this is they say, okay, if you have money in your account in excess of this reserve requirement, which is 0%, you can loan it to us and earn interest. And right now that rate, called the IORB rate, is 5.15%. So there's no incentive for a bank to loan out money higher than an amount. That's how the Fed is trying to attack inflation and constrict the economy. As a side note, before until March 2022, the reserve, this IORB rate was 0.15%, so it's gone up by 5%. There's also another policy which affects the money supply. It's called fiscal policy. And basically that means that if the government is collecting revenue and spending the same amount of revenue, there's no effect on the supply of money. But if you have deficit spending, that means the government is issuing bonds, in effect making money, and also taking away money, the opportunity that people would have to invest in private companies, and that increases the money supply too. Now I have this chart here that shows the increasing inflation rate. You can see prior to the COVID-19 epidemic, the inflation rate was more or less under 2%, and then it skyrocketed. Okay, now when you look at this chart, the fiscal year refers to the government fiscal year, which ends in September 30th, not December 31. So remember this. So here's a chart that shows the growth in the money supply for March 2020. Why did the money supply grow so dramatically? Number one, overspending during the COVID epidemic. And afterwards, the change in the Fed's reserve rate. And then we had two very expensive bills that were passed by Congress. One, it was called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and that was $1.2 trillion. And then there was the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which included about $400 billion in climate change spending. Well, okay, this bill, this infrastructure bill, contained a lot of good things, of course. Everyone wants more bridges and better roads. But if you look at it carefully, a good part of it was focused not on really increasing our infrastructure, but modifying it for climate change reasons. When we come to the Inflation Reduction Act, it was of that amount, you know, it includes, well, tax credits to move to what's called clean energy, that basically is paying coal plants to close, even though we have no replacement for them. Consumer tax incentives and so forth, like tax credits for buying the list of 22 approved electric vehicles. So all that money coming into the system increased the money supply, and that's how we have inflation. Now, who can we blame for increasing inflation? I have a picture of three people that you might know right here. These people are my opponents in this race. You know, it feels really good to spend money. Everybody's happy when you spend money, when you're handing it out. But it's kind of like a drinking binge. The next morning you have a hangover. And right now, America has a hangover, and the ordinary people are suffering. I like to also point out that whenever you have government handing out money, there's always going to be some interest group or somebody who's wangled their way in and got a piece of the pie, because that's just how politics works. Even when you have competitive bidding, that's what happens. How does that happen? Well, in practical matters, let's say you're a government official and you want to give a contract to ABC company, and you don't want to have it go to competitive bidding. Well, you're going to write that bid that you're seeking so that only ABC company has all the prerequisites in order to obtain that, to win that bid. So here's in summary. When I'm elected and I'm in the U.S. Senate, I'm going to be one of the adults in the U.S. Capitol. I'm going to say, whoa, we're going to only spend the money that we bring in and no more. That is the way to stop inflation permanently. Thank you, and in about a week I'll have another video for you.